Rex!
A Navy SEAL's dog disappeared into the smoke after a training explosion that wasn't supposed to happen. For 3 days, Tyler searched the mountains, calling Rex's name until his voice gave out. Everyone told him to give up. The dog was gone, but on the 4th morning something walked out of the forest. It was Rex, and he wasn't alone. What followed behind him would expose a crime that reached higher than anyone imagined, and the man responsible thought the wilderness would keep his secrets buried forever. Tyler Garrett had been a Navy SEAL for 12 years, and Rex had been by his side for 8 of them. The German Shepherd wasn't just a military working dog. He was Tyler's partner, his friend, and the only family he had left after his wife passed 2 years ago from cancer. They'd served together in places most people couldn't pronounce, seen things that never made it into reports, and saved lives that would never know their names. Now they were both retired, living in a small cabin in the Colorado mountains, far from the noise and chaos of their former lives. The cabin sat at the end of a dirt road that turned to mud in spring and froze solid in winter. Tyler liked it that way. No neighbors for 5 miles, no traffic, no sirens, just the sound of wind through pine trees and Rex's paws on the wooden porch. They'd wake up before dawn, run the mountain trails together, and spend their days chopping wood, fishing the creek, and watching the sun set behind the peaks. It was quiet. It was peaceful. It was exactly what Tyler needed after years of violence and chaos. On the morning everything changed, Tyler and Rex were doing what they did every Tuesday. They drove down to the valley where a private security company ran training exercises for former military guys who wanted to stay sharp. Tyler didn't need the money. He had his pension and some savings. But he liked helping train the younger guys, showing them things the textbooks didn't teach. Rex loved it too. The dog was 10 years old now, with gray around his muzzle, but he still moved like he was 3 when he got to run obstacle courses and practice tracking drills. The training facility sat on 200 acres of rough terrain, with shooting ranges, mock buildings, and enough space to simulate real combat scenarios. The property had been a mining operation decades ago, and the old structures made perfect training grounds. Concrete walls still stood in places, creating natural obstacles and cover points. About 15 guys showed up that morning, most of them former Army or Marines, a few ex-cops mixed in. They ranged in age from 25 to 50, all of them carrying the same look in their eyes that Tyler recognized from his own mirror. They were men who'd seen combat, who understood violence, and who wanted to stay prepared even in civilian life. Tyler knew most of them by name. There was Kevin, former Army Ranger who'd done 3 tours in Afghanistan. There was Miguel, ex-Marine who'd lost part of his hearing to an IED blast. There was Thomas, former cop who'd retired early after a shooting that still haunted him. Good men, damaged men, men trying to find their place in a world that didn't understand what they'd been through. Tyler related to every single one of them. That's why he volunteered his time here, why he pushed them hard but also listened when they needed to talk. The morning started like any other training day. Tyler led them through warm-ups, physical drills that kept their bodies sharp. Rex participated too, running alongside the men, showing them what a well-trained K9 could do. The guys loved Rex. Some of them had worked with military dogs overseas and missed that partnership. Others had never experienced it, but respected what these animals could do. Rex seemed to know he was teaching, seemed to understand his role. He'd demonstrate commands perfectly, then sit and watch while the men tried to apply the same principles to their own training. After warm-ups, Tyler set up the hostage rescue scenario. This was advanced stuff, the kind of drill that required split-second decisions and perfect coordination. Tyler played the role of lead instructor while Dennis Crawford, the facility manager, helped set up the technical equipment. Dennis was former Air Force, a good guy who'd opened this facility 5 years ago specifically to help veterans stay sharp. He'd invested his own money, his own time, and his own sweat into making this place work. Tyler respected that dedication. They were using one of the old mining buildings for the scenario. It had multiple rooms, narrow hallways, and limited entry points, perfect for teaching close-quarters combat. Tyler explained the scenario in detail. Hostages on the 2nd floor, armed suspects on the 1st, unknown number of bad guys, limited time before the situation escalated. The goal was to breach fast, clear each room systematically, identify threats versus hostages, and secure everyone safely. It was the kind of operation Tyler had done dozens of times overseas, and he wanted these guys to understand both the mechanics and the mindset required. They ran through it once slowly, with Tyler pointing out angles, cover positions, and communication protocols. Rex demonstrated how a K9 could enter first, assess threats quickly, and provide real-time intelligence that could save lives. The dog moved through the building like a professional, checking corners, alerting to mock threats, and responding to Tyler's commands with precision. The men watched in awe. This was why military dogs were so valuable. They could do in seconds what took humans minutes. Then they prepared for a live drill. Not live ammunition, of course, but simulated rounds and breaching charges that created realistic conditions. Tyler assigned roles. Kevin would lead the entry team, Miguel would provide cover, Thomas would handle hostage extraction, others filled supporting roles. Everyone had specific responsibilities, specific sectors to clear. Tyler emphasized communication. In operations like this, silence could be deadly. They needed to talk to each other, coordinate movements, and adapt to changing situations. Dennis set up the breaching charges on the main door. These were training explosives designed to create loud bangs and puffs of smoke without actually destroying anything or causing injury. Tyler had used these charges hundreds of times in training. They were safe when handled properly. Dennis was careful, double-checking measurements and placement. Everything looked good. Tyler gave the signal to prepare for breach. Tyler was running them through a hostage rescue drill when the day took its turn toward disaster. The scenario was simple. Bad guys holding civilians in a warehouse. Approach silent, breach fast, secure the hostages, get out clean. Tyler had Rex demonstrate how a K9 could clear rooms faster than any human, how the dog could identify threats and protect the innocent. The guys loved watching Rex work. The dog was a professional, calm, and focused, doing exactly what he'd been trained to do for years. Then someone made a mistake with the breaching charges. These were supposed to be training explosives, small controlled bangs that simulated real breaches without actually destroying anything. But something went wrong. Maybe someone used the wrong charge, maybe equipment failed, maybe it was sabotage. Tyler would spend the next 3 days wondering about that. All he knew in the moment was that the explosion was massive, way bigger than it should have been. The blast threw Tyler 15 feet backward. His ears rang so loud he couldn't hear anything else. Smoke filled the air, thick and black, smelling like chemicals and burned wood. Parts of the training building collapsed. Men were shouting, but Tyler couldn't make out the words. He pushed himself up, dizzy and confused, and immediately looked for Rex. The dog had been right beside him before the explosion. Now Tyler couldn't see him anywhere through the smoke. Tyler started yelling Rex's name, stumbling through the debris. Other guys were helping the injured, calling for medics, trying to figure out what happened, but Tyler only cared about finding his dog. He searched the wreckage, looked under collapsed walls, called until his throat burned. Rex was trained to come when called, no matter what. The dog had never ignored Tyler's commands, never, but now there was only silence. For 2 hours, Tyler and a dozen other men searched every inch of the training grounds. They formed search lines, moved through the debris systematically, checked every possible space where an injured dog might have crawled. Tyler called Rex's name until his voice was raw and hoarse. Other men joined in, their voices echoing across the property, but there was no response. No bark, no whine, nothing. They found Rex's collar near the blast site, the buckle torn open. That meant Rex had been close to the explosion, close enough that the force ripped the collar right off him. Tyler's hands shook as he held the collar, seeing the tag with Rex's name hanging from it. The metal was still warm from being near the blast. Tyler traced his fingers over the engraved letters. He'd put this collar on Rex 8 years ago, the day they'd been officially partnered. It had never come off since then, not once. Now it was torn and damaged, and Rex was gone. Some of the guys tried to tell him the dog probably ran off scared, that he'd come back when he calmed down. Tyler wanted to believe that. Part of him desperately hoped it was true. But another part of him, the part that had seen too much combat and too much death, knew better. Rex didn't run from explosions. The dog had been in real firefights, had worked in war zones where mortars fell and bullets flew. He'd never panicked, never abandoned his post. If Rex had run, it was because something else had drawn him away. something important enough to override his training and his loyalty to Tyler. Tyler expanded the search into the forest that bordered the training grounds. The woods were thick here, full of pine trees and underbrush that made visibility difficult. Tyler pushed through branches, climbed over fallen logs, and searched every ravine and clearing he could find. Other men joined him, spreading out to cover more ground. They searched until the sun started setting, until the shadows grew long and the temperature dropped. Still no sign of Rex. Dennis Crawford came to find Tyler as darkness fell. The facility manager looked exhausted and worried. He put his hand on Tyler's shoulder and said they'd have to call off the search until morning. It wasn't safe to keep looking in the dark. People could get hurt, could get lost themselves. Tyler understood the logic, but he couldn't accept it. Rex was out there somewhere, possibly hurt, possibly dying. How could Tyler just go home and sleep while his dog needed him? But Dennis was right about the danger. The forest at night was treacherous. There were cliffs, ravines, and wild animals. Tyler knew he couldn't help Rex if he got himself killed stumbling around in the dark. So reluctantly, Tyler agreed to pause until dawn. He grabbed flashlights from his truck, powerful tactical lights that could cut through darkness. He'd continue searching on his own, closer to the facility where the terrain was familiar. Dennis didn't try to stop him. As the sun started setting, the facility manager, a man named Dennis Crawford, put his hand on Tyler's shoulder and said they'd have to call off the search until morning. Tyler refused. He grabbed flashlights and kept looking, hiking into the forest that bordered the training grounds, calling Rex's name into the darkness. But the mountains swallowed his voice and nothing called back. That night, Tyler didn't sleep. He sat on his cabin porch with Rex's collar in his hands, listening to the wind and wondering if his dog was hurt somewhere, alone and unable to get home. He thought about all the times Rex had saved his life overseas, all the times that dog had put himself between Tyler and danger without hesitation. Now Rex needed him, and Tyler had no idea where to look. The next morning, Tyler was back at the training facility before sunrise. Dennis met him at the gate, looking uncomfortable. He explained that investigators were coming to examine the explosion site, that it had to be treated as a crime scene until they figured out what went wrong. Tyler didn't care about investigators. He cared about finding Rex. Dennis let him search the perimeter, but the dog was nowhere. That night, Tyler didn't sleep. He couldn't. He sat on his cabin porch with Rex's collar in his hands, running his thumb over the name tag again and again. The metal was cold now, the warmth from the explosion long gone. Tyler kept replaying the moment in his mind, trying to remember exactly where Rex had been standing when the blast happened. Had the dog been hurt immediately? Had he run into the forest confused and disoriented? Was he lying somewhere unable to move, unable to bark for help? Tyler thought about all the times Rex had saved his life overseas. There was the mission in Afghanistan when Rex had alerted to an IED seconds before Tyler would have stepped on it. There was the firefight in Iraq when Rex had taken down an enemy fighter who'd gotten behind Tyler's squad. There was the night patrol when Rex had heard movement in the darkness and led them away from an ambush. Rex had protected Tyler countless times, had put his own life at risk without hesitation. Now Rex needed him, and Tyler had no idea where to look. The wind moved through the pine trees surrounding Tyler's cabin, making sounds that could have been anything. Every rustle, every crack of a branch made Tyler's heart jump. He kept hopping to hear Rex's distinctive bark, the sound that meant home and safety and partnership. But there was only the wind and the distant sounds of night animals moving through the forest. Tyler listened until dawn, not sleeping, barely breathing, just hopping and praying for some sign. The next morning, Tyler was back at the training facility before sunrise. Dennis met him at the gate, looking like he hadn't slept much either. The investigation team was arriving later that morning, federal agents who would examine the explosion site and try to determine what had gone wrong. But Tyler didn't care about investigations right now. He cared about finding Rex. Dennis handed Tyler a thermos of coffee and a map of the surrounding area. He'd marked potential search zones, places where an injured or confused dog might have gone. For 3 days, Tyler barely ate or slept. He hiked every trail within 10 miles of the facility. He called every animal shelter in 3 counties, describing Rex in detail and leaving his phone number. He called every vet clinic, asking them to watch for a German Shepherd matching Rex's description. He stopped at every house along the mountain roads, showing people Rex's photo from his phone, asking if they'd seen anything. Most people were sympathetic and promised to keep an eye out. Some had their own dogs and understood what Tyler was going through, but nobody had seen Rex. Tyler drove back roads for hours, windows down, calling Rex's name into the forest. He checked abandoned buildings, old mine shafts, anywhere a hurt dog might seek shelter. He hiked to mountain lakes, thinking maybe Rex had gone searching for water. He climbed to high ridges, hoping to spot his dog from a vantage point. He covered miles and miles of rough terrain, his legs aching, his voice failing, his hope beginning to crack. Other guys from the training facility helped when they could. Kevin took a day off work to search the northern section of forest. Miguel organized a group to check the southern trails. Thomas, the former cop, used his law enforcement connections to get search and rescue teams notified. Everyone wanted to help. Rex wasn't just Tyler's dog. In a way, Rex belonged to all of them. The dog represented something pure in a world that often felt corrupt. He was loyalty and courage and all the things they'd fought for overseas. But as the days passed, the search teams began to thin out. People had jobs, families, responsibilities they couldn't ignore forever. Tyler understood. He didn't blame anyone for having to return to their normal lives, but he couldn't stop. Not yet. Not while there was still a chance Rex was alive somewhere waiting to be found. Dennis tried to convince Tyler to rest, to eat something substantial, to sleep for more than an hour at a time. Tyler's hands were cut from pushing through thorny bushes. His face was sunburned from days in the mountain sun. His eyes were bloodshot from exhaustion and tears he tried to hide from others. But Tyler couldn't stop. Stopping felt like giving up, and giving up on Rex was something Tyler couldn't do. On the second night, Tyler called his old team leader from the SEALs, a man named Commander Rick Patterson who'd retired to Virginia. Rick had been there when Tyler and Rex first partnered, had seen their bond develop over years of operations. Tyler hadn't planned to cry during the call, but when he tried to explain what had happened, his voice broke. Rick listened quietly, then said something that stuck with Tyler. He said sometimes the hardest missions were the ones where you had to trust your training and keep moving forward even when everything seemed hopeless. He said Rex was a fighter, trained by the best, and if any dog could survive alone in the wilderness, it was Rex. Tyler called every animal shelter, every vet clinic, every ranger station in the county. He posted pictures online, offered a reward of $5,000 for information leading to Rex's return, and drove back roads looking for any sign of Rex. Other guys from the training facility helped when they could, but everyone was starting to lose hope. The forest was massive. A dog could be anywhere. And after 3 days with no food or water, the chances of finding Rex alive were dropping fast. On the third night, Tyler sat in his cabin and felt something he hadn't felt since his wife died. Complete helplessness. He'd faced enemy soldiers, survived impossible missions, and pulled wounded men out of kill zones, but he couldn't find one dog in the mountains. He looked at Rex's empty bed in the corner, at the food bowl still sitting by the door, and felt the weight of failure crushing down on him. He'd failed his partner, the one living being that depended on him completely, and he'd failed. Tyler prayed that night. He wasn't the most religious man, hadn't been to church since his wife's funeral, but he prayed anyway. He asked God to keep Rex safe, to bring him home, to give Tyler one more chance to do right by his dog. He promised he'd never take Rex for granted again, never forget how lucky he was to have such a loyal friend. Then Tyler lay down on the couch, too exhausted to make it to his bed, and finally fell into a restless sleep. The fourth morning arrived cold and gray. Tyler woke to the sound of scratching at his front door. For a moment he thought he was dreaming, then he heard it again, scratching, and a familiar whine. Tyler jumped off the couch so fast he nearly fell over his own feet. He threw open the door and there was Rex. The dog looked terrible. His fur was matted with dirt and burrs. He had scratches across his face and a cut on his front leg that looked infected. He was limping. He was skinny, but he was alive. Tyler dropped to his knees and wrapped his arms around Rex, feeling the dog's heartbeat, feeling him breathe, not caring that he was crying like he hadn't cried since his wife's funeral. Rex licked Tyler's face and whined, pressing against him like he'd never let go. But then Tyler noticed something. Rex kept looking back toward the forest, whining and pulling away like he wanted Tyler to follow. That wasn't normal behavior. Rex was hurt and exhausted. He should have collapsed the moment he got home. Instead, he was trying to lead Tyler somewhere. Tyler grabbed his jacket, his flashlight, and his first aid kit. He trusted Rex with his life. If the dog wanted to show him something, it was important. Rex led Tyler into the forest, limping but determined. They walked for almost an hour, climbing rocky terrain and pushing through thick brush. Tyler kept asking Rex if he was okay, but the dog just kept going. Finally, they reached a steep ravine that Tyler had never seen before. Rex carefully made his way down the slope, looking back to make sure Tyler was following. At the bottom, hidden behind fallen trees and thick undergrowth, Tyler saw what Rex had found. It was a woman. She was unconscious, barely breathing, wearing what looked like a police uniform that was torn and covered in blood. Her hands were zip-tied together. Her face was bruised so badly Tyler could barely see her features. She'd been beaten, bad, and from the looks of it, she'd been left here to die. Tyler's SEAL training kicked in immediately. He checked her pulse, weak but there. He checked her breathing, shallow but steady. He looked for major injuries and found plenty. Broken ribs probably. Possible internal bleeding, hypothermia for sure. But that wasn't what made Tyler's blood run cold. Curled up against the woman, trying to keep warm, were 3 tiny puppies. They couldn't have been more than a week old, still had their eyes closed, and they were shivering in the freezing mountain air. The woman had somehow kept these puppies alive even while she was dying herself. Tyler understood immediately what had happened. Rex had heard these puppies crying. That's why he'd run toward the explosion site and into the forest. That's where he'd been for 3 days. He'd been trying to help them. Tyler immediately called 911 on his satellite phone. The regular cell service didn't reach this far into the mountains. He gave them coordinates and explained the situation. They said a helicopter would take at least 30 minutes to reach them. 30 minutes this woman might not have. So Tyler did what he'd been trained to do. He started emergency medical care right there in the ravine. He carefully cut the zip ties off her wrists, seeing the deep marks where she'd struggled against them. He took off his jacket and wrapped it around her, trying to get her core temperature up. He checked her pupils, her breathing, her pulse every few minutes. He talked to her, telling her help was coming, telling her she was going to make it, even though he wasn't sure that was true. And he took the 3 puppies, tucked them inside his shirt against his chest, feeling their tiny hearts beating against his skin. They were so small, so fragile, and they desperately needed their mother. Rex lay down next to the woman, like he was trying to keep her warm too. Tyler realized his dog had probably been doing this for 3 days, lying with this woman and her puppies, keeping them alive when they should have died from exposure. That's why Rex looked so rough. He hadn't been taking care of himself. He'd been taking care of them. Tyler felt a surge of pride in his dog that almost overwhelmed him. The woman's eyes fluttered open briefly. She looked at Tyler with confusion and fear, like she couldn't understand what was happening. Tyler kept his voice calm and gentle. He told her his name, told her he was former military, told her she was safe now. She tried to speak but only managed a whisper. Tyler leaned close to hear her. She said one word, puppies. Tyler showed her that he had them, that they were warm and safe. A tear rolled down her bruised face, and then she passed out again. When the rescue helicopter finally arrived, it took 4 paramedics to get the woman up the ravine on a stretcher. Tyler carried the puppies in his jacket, refusing to let them get cold. The whole time, Rex stayed right beside him, limping but alert, like he was making sure his job was done right. The paramedics said it was a miracle the woman was alive. She had broken ribs, a punctured lung, severe hypothermia, and had clearly been beaten and left for dead. But somehow she'd survived. At the hospital, Tyler learned her name was Officer Rachel Summers. She'd been a police officer in the valley town of Pinewood for 6 years. She'd been reported missing 4 days ago after not showing up for her shift. Her police truck had been found abandoned on a mountain road with blood inside. Everyone assumed she'd been killed, but they couldn't find her body. Now they knew why. Someone had driven her deep into the mountains and dumped her in that ravine, probably thinking the wilderness would finish what they started. Tyler stayed at the hospital, sitting in the waiting room with the 3 puppies and Rex. A vet had come to check on the puppies and said they were malnourished and cold but would survive if they got proper care. She showed Tyler how to feed them with special bottles and told him they'd need to eat every few hours. Tyler accepted the responsibility without question. These puppies were alive because Rachel had protected them and Rex had found them. He'd make sure they stayed alive. Hours later, a doctor came out and said Rachel was stable. She needed surgery to repair her lung and would be in the hospital for weeks, but she would live. Tyler felt relief wash over him. The doctor asked if Tyler was family, and he explained how he'd found her. The doctor's expression changed from professional to shocked. He said if Tyler had found her even a few hours later, she would have died. She'd been that close to the edge. Two detectives arrived at the hospital that evening. They wanted to know everything Tyler knew. He told them about the explosion at the training facility, about Rex disappearing, about finding Rachel in the ravine. They wrote it all down, their expressions getting darker with each detail. One of them, a detective named Frank Harrison, asked Tyler if he'd be willing to make a formal statement. Tyler said he'd do whatever they needed. Over the next few days, Tyler visited Rachel every day. She was awake now, able to talk, though every word seemed to hurt her. She told Tyler her story, and it made his blood boil with anger. Rachel had been investigating corruption in her own police department. She discovered that several officers, including her supervisor, Sergeant Paul Hutchins, were involved in drug trafficking. They were using their positions to protect dealers and take a cut of the profits. Rachel had gathered evidence, planned to report it to federal authorities. But someone found out. Hutchins and two other officers ambushed her after her shift. They beat her, zip-tied her, threw her in the back of her own truck and drove her into the mountains. They told her she should have minded her own business. They were going to kill her right there, but then Rachel told them she was pregnant. She wasn't, but she hoped it would make them hesitate. Instead, Hutchins laughed. He said the cold would take care of her, that her body would never be found, and the wolves would scatter whatever was left. But Hutchins didn't know about the puppies. Rachel's dog, a German shepherd named Luna, had been in her truck. Luna was pregnant, about to give birth any day. When those corrupt officers dumped Rachel in the ravine, they didn't check the truck carefully. Luna was hiding under a blanket in the back seat. After they drove away in their separate vehicle, Luna somehow got out of the truck, found Rachel in the ravine, and stayed with her. That night, Luna gave birth to 3 puppies in that cold ravine. And then she did something that still made Tyler's throat tight when he thought about it. Luna left, she went for help. Rachel said she could hear her dog barking in the distance, calling for anyone to come. That barking is what Rex heard after the explosion. That's what drew him into the forest. By the time Rex found them, Luna was gone. Rachel thought maybe the dog had gotten lost or been attacked by wildlife. She'd been alone with 3 newborn puppies, badly injured, knowing she was going to die. But she'd kept those puppies warm. She'd tucked them inside her shirt, held them close, and used what little body heat she had left to keep them alive. She'd done that even while freezing to death herself. Tyler sat there listening to Rachel's story, holding one of those puppies in his hands, and felt anger burn in his chest like he hadn't felt in years. These corrupt cops had tried to murder a good officer for doing the right thing. They'd left her to die in the wilderness, left her with newborn puppies that would have frozen to death. These men wore badges. They were supposed to protect people. Instead, they were criminals hiding behind authority. Tyler asked Rachel what she wanted to do now. She looked at him with fierce determination in her eyes, even through the pain and exhaustion. She said she wanted justice. She wanted Hutchins and his crew in prison. She wanted them to pay for what they'd done, not just to her, but to everyone they'd hurt with their corruption. But she was scared. These were police officers. They had power, connections, and they'd proven they were willing to kill to protect their secret. Rachel didn't know who she could trust. Tyler made a decision right there. He told Rachel he'd help her. He'd been a SEAL. He knew how to gather intelligence, how to plan operations, and how to take down bad guys who thought they were untouchable. More than that, Tyler believed in justice. He'd spent years fighting for it overseas. Now he could fight for it right here at home. Rachel looked at him like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. She asked why he'd do this for her. Tyler looked at Rex, sleeping beside Rachel's bed, and at the 3 puppies in the basket on the chair. He said because Rex had led him to her for a reason. The first thing Tyler did was contact people he trusted. He called former teammates, guys he'd served with who now worked in federal law enforcement. He explained the situation and asked for help. Within 24 hours, 2 FBI agents arrived in town. They were good men, veterans themselves, who'd heard stories about Tyler and respected what he'd done in service. They listened to Rachel's story, looked at the evidence she'd gathered before the attack, and confirmed what Tyler suspected. This was bigger than a few corrupt cops. This was an organized operation that needed to be taken down properly. But there was a problem. Hutchins and his crew didn't know Rachel was alive yet. The hospital had kept her admission quiet at the detective's request. As far as the corrupt officers knew, Rachel had died in that ravine, her body lost to the wilderness. That gave Tyler and the FBI an advantage. They had time to build a case without the suspects knowing they were being investigated. But it also meant Rachel had to stay hidden. If word got out that she'd survived, Hutchins would run or worse, try to finish the job. So Rachel stayed in the hospital under a fake name, registered as Sarah Martinez from Denver, someone who'd been in a hiking accident. The hospital staff who knew the truth were sworn to secrecy. Only a handful of nurses and doctors were told the real situation, people Dennis and the FBI agents had personally vetted. Rachel's room was at the end of a secure wing with an agent posted outside at all times. Her phone had been destroyed when Hutchins attacked her, so there was no way for the corrupt officers to track her electronically. For all practical purposes, Rachel Summers had vanished just as thoroughly as Hutchins had intended. The FBI agents worked on building their case. They dove deep into Hutchins's finances, his communications, his connections. They interviewed other officers in the Pinewood Police Department, carefully feeling out who could be trusted and who might be involved in the corruption. It was slow, careful work. They couldn't afford to tip off Hutchins or his crew. One wrong move and the suspects would scatter, destroy evidence, or worse, try again to silence Rachel permanently. Meanwhile, Tyler became something he'd never expected to be. He became Rachel's protector and her partner in making sure justice was served. The hospital released Rachel after 2 weeks, but she couldn't go home. Her house would be the first place Hutchins would look if he suspected she was alive. The department would be watching it, her friends would be questioned. Every place she'd normally go would be dangerous. So Tyler made a decision. He brought her to his cabin. The drive up the mountain was quiet. Rachel sat in the passenger seat of Tyler's truck, staring out the window at the forest passing by. She was wearing borrowed clothes from a nurse, a plain sweatshirt and jeans that hung loose on her still-recovering body. The bruises on her face had faded from purple to yellow-green, but they were still visible. She moved carefully, every breath reminding her of broken ribs that were still healing. Tyler drove slowly, avoiding the worst bumps in the dirt road, trying not to cause her more pain. When they arrived at the cabin, Rachel looked at the simple structure with surprise. She'd expected something bigger, maybe, or more modern, but Tyler's cabin was basic. One main room that served as kitchen, living room, and dining area. A bedroom barely big enough for his bed. A bathroom with a shower that only worked when the water pump cooperated, but it had sturdy walls, a working fireplace, and most importantly, it was completely off the grid. No registered address. No utility bills with his name on them. No paper trail that would lead anyone here. It was perfect for keeping Rachel hidden. Tyler carried her bag inside while Rex bounded ahead, tail wagging, happy to be home. The 3 puppies were in a box by the fireplace, wrapped in blankets and sleeping peacefully. Rachel immediately went to them, kneeling down despite the pain it caused her ribs. She picked up each puppy carefully, checking them over with the practiced hands of someone who'd been caring for animals her whole life. Hope, faith, and courage. They'd grown in the 2 weeks since the rescue, their eyes now open, their little legs stronger. They recognized Rachel's scent and squirmed toward her, making tiny puppy sounds that brought tears to her eyes. Those first few days at the cabin were hard. Rachel was still healing, could barely move without pain. Simple tasks like getting dressed or climbing the stairs to the loft where Tyler set up a bed for her left her exhausted and hurting. Tyler did what he needed to do with the same efficiency he'd shown in combat. He'd been trained as a combat medic in the SEALs, knew how to change bandages, monitor wounds for infection, and manage pain without prescription medications that would create a paper trail. He treated Rachel's injuries with professional detachment during the medical care, but with genuine compassion during everything else. But more than the physical care, Rachel needed someone to talk to. She'd been through trauma that would break most people. She'd been betrayed by people she trusted, nearly murdered by men who were supposed to protect and serve. She'd spent days in the wilderness convinced she would die, holding newborn puppies and trying to keep them warm with body heat she barely had. She'd survived something that should have killed her, and now she was hiding in a stranger's cabin while the men who tried to murder her walked free, still wearing badges and guns. The nightmare started the first night. Tyler woke to the sound of Rachel screaming in the loft. He rushed up the stairs to find her sitting up in bed, shaking and crying, caught in the grip of a dream where Hutchins was standing over her again, zip-tying her wrists, dragging her toward the ravine. Tyler sat beside her, not touching because he didn't know if that would help or make it worse, just sitting there and talking in a calm voice until Rachel came back to reality. He told her she was safe, that Hutchins didn't know where she was, that nobody could hurt her here. Rachel grabbed Tyler's hand and held on like she was drowning. Tyler understood trauma. He'd carried his own for years, nightmares and flashbacks and moments where the past felt more real than the present. So he talked with Rachel about the things she couldn't tell the doctors or investigators. He talked about the nightmares, the anger, the guilt about things she couldn't control. He shared his own struggles after leaving the military, after losing his wife, after wondering if he'd ever feel normal again. Those conversations happened in the dark hours of night, when defenses were down and honesty came easier. During the day, Rachel focused on the puppies. Caring for them gave her purpose, gave her something to focus on besides the pain and fear. She bottle-fed them every few hours, Tyler helping when he could, both of them learning the strange art of burping a puppy and cleaning them properly. The puppies were thriving under their care, growing stronger and more active each day. They'd started trying to walk, their tiny legs wobbling as they explored the cabin floor. Rex watched over them like a proud uncle, letting them climb on him and chew his ears with surprising patience for an old military dog. Those conversations, sitting on the cabin porch while Rex played with the puppies in the yard, helped Rachel heal in ways medicine couldn't. The puppies grew stronger every day. Tyler and Rachel named them Hope, Faith, and Courage, tiny names for tiny dogs that had survived something impossible. Rachel bottle-fed them every few hours and Tyler helped, learning how to burp a puppy and clean them properly. It was strange and beautiful, this new routine. A retired SEAL and a wounded cop playing parents to 3 German Shepherd puppies while planning how to take down corrupt officers. Life took unexpected turns sometimes. During those weeks, Tyler taught Rachel things he'd learned in the SEALs. He showed her how to improve her awareness, how to spot surveillance, how to defend herself better. Rachel was already tough, already knew how to fight, but Tyler taught her the advanced stuff, the techniques that could save her life if things went wrong. They trained in Tyler's yard, starting slow because of her injuries, gradually building up her strength and confidence. Rex watched every session like a proud coach, and the puppies tumbled around their feet, making serious training sessions somehow lighter. The FBI agents visited every few days with updates. They'd been investigating Hutchins and his crew quietly, building a case that would stand up in federal court. They'd found more evidence of corruption, more victims who'd been too scared to come forward. The case was growing bigger than anyone expected. But they needed one more thing to make it airtight. They needed to catch Hutchins in the act, on recording, admitting what he'd done. That meant someone had to wear a wire and confront him directly. Rachel volunteered immediately. Tyler said absolutely not, it was too dangerous. Hutchins had already tried to kill her once, but Rachel was determined. She said this was her case, her fight, and she'd see it through to the end. The FBI agents agreed with Rachel. They said they'd have surveillance teams watching, backup ready to move in, and the best equipment to keep her safe. But Tyler wasn't convinced. He'd seen operations go wrong too many times. Plans were great until someone started shooting. They argued about it for 3 days. Rachel accused Tyler of treating her like she was weak. Tyler said he was treating her like someone who'd been through hell and deserved to not walk back into danger. But finally, Tyler realized something. This wasn't about him protecting Rachel. This was about Rachel taking back her power. Hutchins had tried to break her, tried to make her another victim. By confronting him, by getting justice, Rachel would prove that she wasn't broken. Tyler understood that. So he stopped arguing and started planning. If Rachel was going to confront Hutchins with a wire, they'd do it Tyler's way. That meant preparation. Tyler spent a week doing reconnaissance on Hutchins, learning his patterns, his habits, where he went and when. Tyler used every skill he'd learned in special operations, and what he found made him even more certain this needed to end. Hutchins wasn't just corrupt. He was careless, arrogant, and convinced he was untouchable. That overconfidence would be his downfall. The plan was simple. Rachel would arrange to meet Hutchins at a neutral location, an old warehouse on the edge of town that had been abandoned for years. She'd tell him through a burner phone that she'd survived, that she had evidence that would destroy him, and that she wanted to make a deal. Hutchins would come because he'd want to know what she had, and because he'd see a chance to finish what he started. But what he wouldn't know was that every word would be recorded, that federal agents would be positioned around the warehouse, and that Tyler would be there with Rex, watching Rachel's back. The night before the meeting, Tyler couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about everything that could go wrong. Hutchins might bring backup, he might start shooting immediately, he might have an escape route they didn't know about. Tyler had led missions with less risk that had ended in casualties. But when he looked at Rachel sleeping on the cabin couch with the 3 puppies curled up beside her, he knew this was worth the risk. This was about stopping evil, protecting the innocent, and making sure justice was served. That's what Tyler had always fought for. The day of the meeting arrived cold and overcast. Rachel put on the wire a tiny microphone hidden in her jacket that would transmit everything to FBI vans parked blocks away. Tyler helped her check it 3 times. The FBI agents went over the plan again. If anything went wrong, Rachel was to say the word sunshine and they'd move in immediately. But the goal was to let Hutchins talk, to let him confess on tape before they arrested him. Rachel looked calm and focused. Tyler saw the police officer she'd been before all this, strong and determined to do what was right. Tyler and Rex took their position an hour before the meeting. They were on the roof of a building next to the warehouse with a clear view of the entrance and the surrounding area. Tyler had his binoculars and a rifle he hoped he wouldn't need to use. Rex sat beside him, alert and quiet, sensing the tension. They watched as FBI agents moved into position, invisible to anyone who wasn't looking for them. The trap was set. Hutchins arrived exactly on time, driving an unmarked police car. He was alone, which surprised Tyler. Arrogant or stupid, maybe both. Hutchins got out of the car, looked around like he owned the place, and walked into the warehouse. A minute later, Rachel followed. Tyler watched her walk through that door and felt his heart pound. This was it. Through the wire, Tyler and the FBI agents heard everything. Rachel's voice was steady as she told Hutchins she'd survived. Hutchins laughed, actually laughed, and said that was unfortunate for her. He asked where she'd been hiding. Rachel said somewhere safe, somewhere he'd never find. Then she told him about the evidence she had, the bank records, the witness statements, everything that would put him and his crew in prison for decades. Hutchins stopped laughing. His voice got cold, dangerous. He asked what Rachel wanted. She said she wanted him to turn himself in, confess everything, and face justice. Hutchins laughed again, but this time it was bitter. He said Rachel didn't understand how the world worked. He said cops like him, they were the ones who really ran things. They decided what was right and wrong. And stupid cops like Rachel who didn't get that, they ended up dead in ravines. Then he said the words that sealed his fate. He admitted everything. The drug trafficking, the payoffs, the other officers involved. And he admitted trying to kill Rachel, said his only regret was that he hadn't made sure she was dead before leaving her in that ravine. Tyler heard it all, so did the FBI agents. They had everything they needed on tape. The signal went out and federal agents swarmed the warehouse from every direction. Tyler and Rex rushed down from their position, running toward the warehouse. Tyler heard shouting, heard someone demanding that Hutchins get on the ground. Then Tyler heard the one thing he'd been dreading, a gunshot. Tyler hit the warehouse door at full speed with Rex right behind him. Inside, he saw chaos. Hutchins had drawn his weapon, tried to shoot his way out, but FBI agents had been faster. Hutchins was on the ground, bleeding from a shoulder wound, being handcuffed by 3 agents. Rachel was standing against the far wall, shaken but unharmed. Tyler ran to her, checked that she was okay. She was crying, but not from fear, from relief. It was over. Hutchins was screaming about his rights, about lawyers, about how this wouldn't stick. But Tyler knew better. They had him on tape confessing to attempted murder, conspiracy, drug trafficking, and corruption. The other officers in his crew were being arrested at the same moment in coordinated raids across the county. The FBI had built an airtight case. These men would spend decades in prison. As paramedics treated Hutchins's wound and prepared to take him to the hospital under guard, Tyler stood with Rachel and watched. She'd done it. She'd faced the man who tried to kill her and brought him to justice. Tyler put his arm around her shoulders and she leaned against him, exhausted but victorious. Rex sat beside them both, and Tyler realized his dog had started this whole thing by hearing puppies crying in the wilderness. Sometimes the smallest sounds led to the biggest changes. The trial happened 4 months later. Hutchins and 6 other officers were convicted on multiple federal charges. The judge called it one of the worst cases of police corruption he'd ever seen. Hutchins got 30 years without parole. The others got between 15 and 25 years each. The town of Pinewood was shocked, angry, and then grateful that the corruption had been exposed. Rachel became a hero, though she insisted she'd just been doing her job. Tyler attended every day of the trial, sitting in the back row with Rex beside him. The judge allowed the dog in court after hearing how Rex had found Rachel and saved her life. People came up to Tyler during breaks, thanking him for helping bring these criminals to justice. But Tyler always directed them to Rachel. She was the real hero. She'd gathered the evidence, survived the attack, and had the courage to face her attackers. Tyler had just helped. After the trial ended, Rachel faced a decision about her future. The Pinewood Police Department wanted her back, offered her a promotion and a position in their new internal affairs unit. Federal agencies offered her jobs investigating corruption across the state. But Rachel surprised everyone. She said she was done being a police officer. The badge had been tarnished for her not by her own actions but by what she'd seen others do with it. Instead, Rachel decided to become a victim's advocate, helping people who'd been hurt by the system fight back and get justice. Tyler helped Rachel set up her new life. She bought a small house in the valley with money from the book deal she signed to tell her story. Tyler helped her move in, helped her paint the walls, and helped her build a fence around the yard. A yard she needed because Rachel was keeping all 3 puppies. Hope, faith, and courage had grown into beautiful young dogs, strong and healthy, with their mother Luna's intelligence and personality. Luna had eventually been found 3 weeks after the rescue, injured but alive, and had been reunited with Rachel and her puppies. The day Rachel moved into her new house, she asked Tyler to stay for dinner. They sat on her back porch, watching the 4 German shepherds play in the yard and talked about everything that had happened. Rachel said she couldn't believe how much her life had changed in 6 months. She'd gone from nearly dying in a ravine to starting a whole new career helping others. She said it was all because of Tyler and Rex. Tyler shook his head. He said it was all because Rachel had refused to give up, even when everything seemed hopeless. Rachel looked at Tyler for a long moment, then asked if he ever got lonely up in his cabin. Tyler admitted he did sometimes. Rachel asked if he'd ever thought about not being alone. Tyler's heart started beating faster. He'd thought about Rachel constantly for months, but he'd told himself it was just about protecting her, about making sure she was safe. Now he wasn't sure. Rachel smiled and said she'd thought about Tyler too, about how he'd saved her life, about how he'd been there for her when everyone else had given up, about how gentle he was with the puppies and how strong he was against her enemies. Tyler didn't know what to say. It had been 2 years since his wife died, and he'd thought he'd never feel anything like love again. But sitting there with Rachel, watching Rex play with Luna and the puppies, Tyler felt something shift in his chest. Maybe there was room in his life for more than just memories and solitude. Maybe God had brought Rachel into his life for more than one reason. Tyler reached over and took Rachel's hand. She squeezed back. They didn't need to say anything else right then. Over the next year, Tyler and Rachel built something together. It wasn't rushed or forced. It was natural, like 2 people who'd been through war finding peace together. Tyler kept his cabin but spent more and more time at Rachel's house. They worked together sometimes, with Tyler using his skills to help Rachel's advocacy organization investigate cases and gather evidence. They trained together, ran the mountain trails with all 5 dogs, and built a life that neither of them had expected but both of them needed. Rachel's organization grew fast. Victims of corruption and abuse came from all over the state seeking her help. She hired more staff, opened a bigger office, and started making real change in the system. Tyler was proud of her every single day. He watched her take the worst thing that had ever happened to her and turn it into something that helped countless others. That took a kind of strength Tyler respected more than anything. On the anniversary of the day Rex had led Tyler into the ravine, Rachel and Tyler hiked back to that spot together with all the dogs. It was a beautiful morning, sunny and clear. They stood there looking at the place where Rachel had nearly died, where the puppies had been born, where everything had changed. Rachel said she wanted to plant something there, a memorial to what had happened. Tyler thought that was perfect. They planted a small oak tree, tough and strong, just like Rachel. Just like the puppies that had survived against impossible odds. As they hiked back to the cabin that day, Rachel stopped and turned to Tyler. She said she had something to tell him. Tyler's heart jumped, suddenly nervous. Rachel smiled and said she'd been thinking a lot about the future, about what she wanted her life to look like. She said she wanted Tyler in it permanently. She wanted to build a life together, wanted to have a family, wanted to give those dogs some human siblings to watch over. Tyler felt tears in his eyes as he pulled Rachel close and said yes. Yes to all of it. They got married 6 months later in a small ceremony in the mountains. Only close friends and family attended, but the real stars of the wedding were the 5 German shepherds who all wore formal bandanas for the occasion. Rex stood beside Tyler as his best man, which made some people laugh and others cry. The judge who presided over the ceremony was the same one who'd sentenced Hutchins and his crew. He said it was an honor to witness something beautiful come from something that had started so dark. Tyler and Rachel bought a bigger property together, with enough land for the dogs to run and room to grow their family. Rachel kept running her advocacy organization, and Tyler helped however he could. They also started a program training rescue dogs to help search and rescue operations, inspired by what Rex had done. The program grew bigger than they'd expected, with dogs and handlers coming from across the country to train. 2 years after the wedding, Rachel gave birth to a daughter. They named her Hope, after the first puppy that had survived that terrible night in the ravine. Little Hope was born with her mother's determination and her father's calm strength. Rex appointed himself her personal guardian from the moment she came home from the hospital. The old dog followed that little girl everywhere, gentle and patient in ways that made Tyler's heart full. More children came. A son named Rex after the dog that had saved his mother's life. Twin girls named Grace and Faith. Each child grew up surrounded by dogs and love, learning from their parents about courage, justice, and helping others. Tyler and Rachel told them the story of how they met, age-appropriate versions at first, then the full truth as the kids got older. The children grew up understanding that good people sometimes face terrible things, but that standing up for what's right always matters. Rex lived to be 16 years old, which was ancient for a German shepherd his size. He spent his final years lying in the sun, playing gently with the children and being honored as the hero he was. When Rex finally passed peacefully in his sleep, the whole family mourned. They buried him on their property under another oak tree with a headstone that read, "Rex, loyal friend, brave protector, the dog who changed everything." Luna lived almost as long, passing at 15. Hope, Faith, and Courage all had puppies of their own over the years, continuing the bloodline of dogs that had survived against impossible odds. Rachel's organization kept growing, helping hundreds of victims get justice and rebuild their lives. Tyler trained dogs and mentored young veterans who were struggling with civilian life, giving them purpose the way Rex had given him purpose. On quiet evenings, Tyler and Rachel would sit on their porch, watching their children play with the dogs in the yard and talk about how strange and beautiful life was. How an explosion at a training facility had led to Rex disappearing. How that disappearance had led to finding Rachel. How that rescue had led to justice, to love, to a family that neither of them had imagined possible. Tyler would hold Rachel's hand and thank God for the day his dog heard puppies crying in the wilderness. Rachel would squeeze back and say she thanked God every day for the Navy SEAL who didn't give up searching for his dog. Their story spread far beyond their small mountain community. News outlets covered it. A movie was made. But Tyler and Rachel never let fame change who they were or what they believed in. They stayed focused on helping others, on raising their children right, and on honoring the memory of a dog who taught them both that sometimes the smallest acts of compassion lead to the biggest changes. Years later, when their children were grown and starting families of their own, Tyler and Rachel took a trip back to where it all started. They hiked to the ravine one more time, now with walking sticks and gray in their hair. The oak trees they'd planted had grown tall and strong. They sat under those trees, holding hands, and reflected on the life they'd built from the ashes of tragedy. Rachel said she sometimes still couldn't believe she'd survived that night in the ravine. Tyler said he couldn't believe he'd been lucky enough to find her. They talked about Rex, about how that dog had saved more than just lives. He'd saved souls. He'd brought 2 broken people together and given them a reason to keep fighting, keep loving, and keep believing that good could triumph over evil. As the sun set over the mountains that evening, Tyler and Rachel made a promise to each other and to the memory of Rex. They'd keep telling their story. They'd keep helping others. They'd keep fighting for justice. And they'd keep honoring the sacrifices made by a loyal dog who'd heard crying in the wilderness and decided to help, no matter the cost to himself. The story of the Navy SEAL's dog who vanished after an explosion and returned 3 days later with something unexpected became a legend in their community and beyond. It was a story about loyalty, courage, justice, and love. It was a story about how sometimes the worst moments in life lead to the best outcomes. And it was a story about how God works through the most unexpected ways, even through a dog's decision to run toward danger instead of away from it. Tyler and Rachel never forgot where they came from or what they'd been through. They used their story to inspire others facing darkness, to show that survival was possible, that justice could be achieved, and that love could bloom even in the coldest places. And every time they told their story, they made sure to end it the same way. They'd say that if you're going through something terrible right now, if you feel alone or hopeless or like evil is winning, don't give up. Keep fighting, keep believing, keep looking for the helpers, and be a helper when you can. Because somewhere out there, someone might be searching for you, refusing to give up, just like Tyler searched for Rex. Somewhere out there, God might be preparing a rescue you can't see yet, just like he prepared Rex to hear those puppies crying. And somewhere out there, your story of survival and triumph is waiting to be written. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment saying Amen if you believe that God works through unexpected ways. And remember, the darkest nights often come right before the most beautiful dawns. Never stop believing, never stop fighting, never stop hopping. Because your breakthrough might be just around the corner, led by the most unexpected hero, just like a Navy SEAL's dog who refused to let anyone die alone in the wilderness. God bless you, and may you find the courage to face whatever ravine you're in right now, knowing that rescue is coming, that justice will prevail, and that love will always triumph over hate. Share this story. Save a life, change the world, one act of compassion at a time. Amen.